He's eating oatmeal.
I need 911. I need 911.
Yeah, that looks like yummy, Mark. If you can hear my voice, please put your hands on top of your head, unless you're Mark, because you have a spoon. Okay. He's eating. All right, we're gonna get started. There's a lot more to read, and so we're just gonna have to get started because there's a lot to read. And let's just do a quick reminder. Remember, there's 3 characters: Matt, who's the cabin boy. I should put my mask back up because I'm done drinking my Sprite. Matt, who's the cabin boy. Mr. Benjamin Malloy, who is the sick guy that they found in the hot air balloon, and Malloy's granddaughter, whose name is Kate. They're reading his journal, trying to find out if these flying creatures are real or if they are made up, because remember, Malloy is really sick, so he might be delirious, which is our vocabulary word. So our last thing we kind of talked about was how Malloy speaks super formal and how the Matt is super like informal, and he's just like, yeah, crazy, half this, half that. And we just finished September 4th entry on the page before, and now we are going to continue reading on paragraph 20. Across the next 2 pages were drawings of skeletons. Can anyone explain to me what a skeleton is? We should all know it. What is it? What is a skeleton, Olive? Nice and loud.
A skeleton is when your body.
Yeah, it's the bones of your body, okay? So that's a skeleton. So, the first one was human. I saw that clearly. The rib cage, the hips, the skull atop the neck. Next to that skeleton, that looked at first glance not very so much different except the hands. The bones of the fingers were all long and flared. It was freakish to look at until I read Benjamin Malloy's caption underneath: Bat. Next to this was a third skeleton, and it seemed some sort of bizarre combination between the two. Shortened legs like a bat, and instead of arms, there was weirdly flared finger bones of a bat. But the skull on top of this one was no bats, nor was it humans. The skull was flatter with sharp teeth. Smaller, yes, but certainly no one would mistake this for a bat, and never for a bird. The drawings were made with scientific care, all shaded and with the length scale to the side. He was a clever man, Kate's grandpa, no questioning that. Seemed to know something about everything. Underneath were all sort of Latin words. So, let's talk about the skeletons. One, normal old human skeleton like mine and yours. The next one was a bat skeleton. And then the third one looked like a bat and a human combined, but then the skull's your head, was even a little bit different. It was flatter, and it had sharper teeth and smaller and craziness. So, Mr. Malloy, how do these drawings help explain him a little bit more? He's very what? He's making all these something. So how can we explain him, Molly? He's very organized. That's a good way to put him. What else is he, Evan? Okay, he wants to make hypotheses. Because, was this an undiscovered species? He doesn't know. He wants to find things out. He's making these skeletons. Obviously, he's not able to look directly at this flying creature's bones. So he's, drawing these just from memory of seeing them. He's very precise. He's very scientific. He's very curious. That's like our word of this whole textbook, because I feel like every story there's something about curiosity. All right, now we're on September 5th. Remember, our first journal entry was from September 2nd, and now we are on September 5th. So it's been 3 days. 9:15 in the morning. Still playing with air currents around the island so I can watch them. They have great curiosity for my balloon, circling high and rarely drawing too close to the gondola. Difficult for me to see their bodies or faces more clearly. They seem weary of me. The sight of my spyglass makes them scatter in an instant. I wonder why. What does weary mean? Or wary? They seem wary of me. What does that mean? If you're wary of someone, what does that mean, Mark?
Tired of them?
I don't really think it means tired of them necessarily.
Just kind of just boring. Like,
I think, like, if you're wary of someone, it kind of means you're a little bit suspicious of them, maybe. Or you're, like, just not so sure about them. Unsure, yeah, Avery, that's a good one. Because like if like a stray cat, if you see a stray cat walking around, they don't always come right up to you. They might be a little bit weary, meaning like, what are you doing here? Why are you in my space? And they just don't necessarily want to come around you. So he's saying these creatures are curious about him, like they want to see what's going on, but they're not coming too close. What? And what? What?
That's exactly what suspicious of Mark.
Yes. Okay. Landon.
He's the imposter.
Every stray cat that I see comes up to me right away because I used to have.
Okay, cool. Put your mask back on if you're talking this way at people, okay? All right, anyways, you should only have a mask break if you're facing forward. And you had a mask break for a really long time now, so put your mask back on. Yes. All right, so they're a little weary of him. They're unsure of him. But that means for 3 days he's been floating over the same island. So that means he's just been going up and down, trying to get away from wind so he doesn't fly away. With the start, I realized these creatures could have been responsible for damaging his balloon. Had they tested the material with their sharp claws, torn enough little gashes to make it sink? 1747, so it's still September 5th because there's no date, so it's the date from the previous. They do not land. In all the time I've been observing, they haven't landed in the trees or on the water. They feed low over the island, preying on all manner of birds. They are vicious hunters. They also eat fish, staffing the water and plunging their rear claws into the sea as they break. They come up with fish or small squid. They lift them high and flip them up in their mouths and take them whole. Sometimes they drop their prey and then dive down and snatch it into their mouths. So, they never ever land. Every single bird or bug eventually has to land. So these creatures are just chilling in the air at all times. That's crazy. They have to be exhausted. And they're ferocious hunters. What does that mean? What's another word for ferocious? Besides you three, because I've already talked to you three today. Ferocious. What does ferocious mean? Nolan.
Like, not calm and crazy.
Not calm, crazy. Molly.
Fierce.
Fierce is another good for it. Ferocious hunter means like they're just snatching their prey. It's not like trying to find it. They're really good at hunting. They're good at finding their food, and they're eating fish and small squid. And it says they're not even taking bites of them. They're just like swallowing them whole. So they must be pretty big if they're able to swallow like just a whole fish. Gross. All right. September 6th. So it's the next day. Dun, 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 dun. 11:17. What are you looking at? Yeah, thanks. 11:17. I have counted 26 of the creatures. I wish Kate could see them, the way they gamble and swirl through the air. I've never seen an animal look so at home in its element. Like dolphins or porpoises or whales, they clearly love to play. Why has no one ever seen these before? Their natural camouflage is excellent, but with so many airships aloft now, surely someone must have seen these creatures. Are there very few? Are these the only ones that exist? So, dun 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 dun, Mr. Malloy is asking all these questions. Why has no one ever seen them? Why are there so few? Are these the only ones? It could be two things. One, these are the only ones and they just have never been seen because they're camouflage, correct? That could be possible. But what's the other reason no one's ever seen them before?
We just said
They never
Nope.
land.
Nope, that's not why.
they're not.
Landon didn't raise his hand, but he said the correct answer. He could be imagining these things, remember? He could be delirious. So either they're so few is why they've never been seen and they're camouflaged, or it's because they're not real at all. Those are the two options. Yes, Evan?
Or maybe it's because the people who have actually made it and maybe seen them, maybe they died.
Or maybe they have been seen before and whoever saw them didn't tell someone. That is a third option.
Or they the other animals.
All right.
The real question is why
The real question is, why isn't Landon raising his hand? I'm not calling on you. On the next page was another sketch, a great flock or herd. I wasn't sure what to call them, of these things circling over the coast of the island. So lots of different animals, when there's a bunch of them together, they have different names. Sometimes they are a flock, sometimes they are a herd. Like a gaggle is what you call geese together. So there's all different types of things. So he's like, there's so many of them. Should I call them a flock? Should I call them a herd? I don't know. September 7th. So it's the next day now. We started on the 2nd of journal entries, and now we are on the 7th, 1340, which is 1:40 in the afternoon. They birth in the air. What does that mean? What does they birth in the air mean? Someone that I haven't talked to. Zach, what does they birth in the air mean, do you think?
That means like birth there.
Right, that means they don't even land to have their babies. They literally are giving birth in midair. Well, how does the baby know how to fly? That's so crazy. They birth in the air, one after another. One of the creatures, a female, I now realize would soar to a great altitude. That means really, really high. 7,000 feet or so. I increased my lift so I could rise with them and keep watch. The female put her head to the wing, or held head to the wind and angled her wings so that she was hovering. Then something dropped from her hindquarters. It happened so quickly, all I was aware was a small, dark bundle plunging away from her. At first, I thought it was merely her droppings, but I quickly realized it was too large. And the female's behavior was most curious. Immediately, she went into a dive too, keeping pace with the falling object. Nolan, there's nothing you should be clicking on, sir. So whatever you're on besides my story is not making Mrs. Kniffle happy. The object wobbled in the air and seemed to enlarge. Even as it fell past me, it was spreading its wings. It was no bigger than a kitten, but its wings, as they unfolded, were many times the width of its body. Out went the wings, instinctively angled so that the newborn's plunge began to slow dramatically. So that means he's dropping super, super fast, but then he spreads his wings out and now he's slowing down. After a moment or two, I saw the wings lift and push tentatively, then again and again, each time with more force. It was flying. So these creatures gave birth in the air, and before the baby, even hit the ground, it was already learning how to fly. So apparently it's just stinking magic, okay? From the moment of birth, it knew how. How could such a thing be possible? Incredible! But then, does not a newborn whale born into the element of water know instantly how to swim? What could it not be so within this creature then? Only air and not water was its element. The mother flew close alongside its child, as if giving advice, monitoring its progress. I watched more females make the climb to the birthing altitude and then release their newborns into the air. All right, so there's just a picture of some more creatures in like color this time instead of sketch.
Yeah, the baby's kind of scary. I like the baby.
So what are two things does Malloy learn from his observations on this page? What's two things that he learns? What's one thing, Brichelle? Yes. In case you guys didn't hear Brichelle because you're talking for some odd reason, she said that he learned that babies are able to fly as soon as they're born. What's the other thing, Molly? He learned that they never land and they give birth in the air. Please turn the page. We are now on September 8th. We're moving right along. We started on the 2nd. Now it's the 8th. September 8th, 12:51. All are feeding today with a new kind of urgency. Are they on some kind of migration? I wonder where they're going, where they come from. I suppose the sky is their home. They need no terrestrial haven. Perhaps they simply move from hemisphere to hemisphere looking for the warmest skies, and the birthing season coincides with the seasons in the southern latitudes. Does anyone know what urgency is? They're feeding with this kind of urgency. What does that mean? Mark?
Like a little panic, like
Yeah, if
fast.
something's urgent, like you're panicked, you got to do it right now. If like when there's a fire drill, we all walk with a sense of urgency. We have to get outside right now. It's not like lollygagging around. It's that you need to do it right now. 19:35. They're departing. Would like to follow, but they're too fast. With tailwinds, I would estimate 80 knots. Amazing creatures, gone now. Weather changing. So look at Malloy's September 8th entry, okay? And if you look down, there's an illustration just right there. But what do you predict is going to happen next? All these creatures were eating, and now they were really, really fast, and now they all left, and now he's saying the weather's changing. So what might happen? Let's just make a prediction. Predict for me, Ava. What? Yeah, they might be migrating. What's another reason they might be moving? Molly? They might be going somewhere to hibernate. Evan?
They're constantly trying to go around the globe to try and find an area that's not so as stormy, maybe more clear.
Okay, Mark, you want to add to it?
It's going to be a volcano eruption and an earthquake and a lot of other natural disasters.
Something might be happening because animals, fun fact, I don't know if you know this, animals can really feel like weather changes and stuff. Some animals have really, really good instincts, and animals know when storms are coming, even when snow is going to happen. They can feel that stuff. So all of a sudden, they're eating a ton, and now they're leaving. And Malloy's saying weather's changing. So maybe they're leaving because a big storm's coming. Or Mark said maybe there's a big natural disaster coming. Maybe something's happening that made them leave. Or maybe they're just rolling out because of migration and the weather's just coincidentally changing at the same time. Yes, Landon.
Maybe they're like ancient animals looking for their home.
That's literally what we said. Maybe they're just leaving.
Looking for their homes, and maybe they had babies and they got lost.
No. We saw them having their babies. We literally just talked about them having their babies. They're not trying to find their babies if they just had them. I don't know what you're talking about. And I disagree with what you're saying. Those are his drawings of the creatures. Those are the creatures. Please stop throwing that, Olive. It's distracting. I'm moving on, okay? Because I'm not really understanding what you're saying. You're not really answering the questions I'm asking. We are on page 101. Maybe it was me, but I thought he sounded pretty dejected. When I turned the page, I felt a bit queasy. Most of the handwriting was smeared by torrential rain. I suppose I could make out only a few words. It seemed a tropical storm had overtaken him and kept him in fits for some time. Oh, look, a tropical storm. So that would be like a hurricane, or before a hurricane, it's like really bad, but it's not quite a hurricane, would be a tropical storm. So he's stuck in this giant rainstorm in a lovely hot air balloon. Obviously, that's not going to be very helpful. Time out. Sorry. Okay. Anyways, email. Had to answer. All right. So, obviously, he's not going to be able to write a ton if there is a rainstorm, right? I don't know if any of you have ever tried to write in a rainstorm, but I'm going to assume it's not very good. So, I think I saw the word damage in one entry and a mention of a problem with the envelope. A hot flash swept my back. Was he leaking? Had the creatures torn his balloon, or was it the storm? Benjamin Malloy had stopped dating his entries, and his coordinates and weather observations seemed half-hearted now. His handwriting was all tilted, the letters slewing into one another. I remembered we'd found him on September 13th, so that left 5 days after his last dated entry. I wondered if he'd fallen ill, too weak to repair his ship. If I have to look at you again, Mr. Landon, you are going to owe me half your recess. You are making so much noise over there. You are being very distracting. Please look at your book and follow along with us. Looking at me is not going to be very helpful. Thank you. I wonder if he'd fallen ill, too weak to repair his ship or keep his log properly. There were some more skeletons of creatures, and then suddenly the sketches became stranger, covering more and more pages. So the sketches became stranger, so maybe he's imagining more and more different things, but obviously something changed, because before he was super diligent, super organized, was keeping dates, talking about the weather. He was writing as much as he could, and now all of a sudden he's not even dating things, tell you when they are, because he's either really sick or something has happened. Airship in the distance will signal for help. We're on page 101. On paragraph 43 or line 43, why is there no date? Tell me. All it says is airship in the distance will signal for help. Why is that the only thing that's there? Julian, why is that the only thing that's there? Why is that all it says? Why doesn't it say the time and the date? Right, it literally just said in the paragraph above that all of a sudden the time and date stopped. So he's either too sick to do it, something has happened. So all it says is will signal for help. I looked for the date but found none. It must have been the aurora he cited, but I'd certainly seen no signal from his gondola. I stared at the last page for a while, the final words, the nothingness after it, and it got me feeling strange, so I had to close the book. I felt a keen disappointment. It was hard to know what to make of all of it. At first, the log had been so clear and reasonable. Remember, reasonable means it made sense, it was logical. But by the end, especially with those pictures, it seemed he was dreaming. When did the real end and the conjuring of a disturbed mind begin? It was pushing 2 a.m. now, and I felt thoroughly ill at ease. I put the book on the shelf and eventually slept. So, how did Malloy's log change over time? Someone just repeat that. How did his log change over time? Marissa, how did his log change over time? How did his log change, Miss Marissa? How did his log change? We just read it. Marissa, give me an answer. How did his log change? Okay, so that's one thing. The dates were no longer there. So remember, it went from super reasonable, super clear, made a lot of sense, to all of a sudden it made no sense at all. The drawing seemed like a dream. It was strange. It was weird. It went from making sense to not making sense. Please turn the page. Oh, look, it looks like a giant volcano. I woke feeling as if I hadn't slept at all. Head thrumming like a symphony. I sprang off the bunk, eager to get the journal back to Kate and talk to her. But it wasn't until lunch that I had a chance. At breakfast, I was serving, and Kate's chaperone, Miss Skimpkins, was at the table the whole time. And then she whisked Kate out before I could even hand her the journal. Then there was cleaning up and the preparing for lunch. So remember, Matt's just a cabin boy, means he just works on the ship, and Kate is clearly there for a reason. Like, she's being served, so she's there for a reason, and he's working on the ship. She's there, I don't know, maybe it's like a vacation, or maybe they're traveling somewhere, but she's not there working, but he is. Around midday, we were passing over the Hawaiis, and the captain slowed down and took us lower so the passengers could get a good look. On other trips, we sometimes made stops, but this was a direct passage, so everyone had to content themselves with peering down at the lush foliage and hearing the shriek of macawas and spider monkeys and toucans and cockatoos. The heady scent of island's flowers reached us even at 100 feet. We were close enough so people on the ground waved and cheered, and bathers on the beach shielded their eyes with tan hands to look up at the great ship as it painted its massive shadow over the sand and water. So it's kind of like in an airplane. Sometimes you make stops places, but sometimes you have to go straight to a place. There aren't stops. So apparently in this giant airship, there's people just aboard, passengers. So remember, Matt's working, but then there's passengers. So the pilot's like, oh, no time to stop. So he lowered the plane so they could see out the window. Probably the little portholes, little round windows. See that? Yeah. See how what?
Looks like the Hindenburg.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it's called, but it's the blimp that
Okay.
almost 5,000 people died.
Okay. So it looks like a blimp. Yeah, I think we already talked about how it looks like a blimp yesterday. We were cruising over the outer islands when the captain entered the lounge grinning. Ladies and gentlemen, a point of interest. Off the starboard side, we're passing Mount Mountaineers, and if I'm not mistaken, she is about to erupt. So we're going to assume this mount, if it's gonna erupt, that means it's a volcano. So he's saying, the captain's like, a point of interest, meaning something that might interest you, is you're about to see a volcano erupt. Nearly everyone put their forks down and knives and rushed to the windows. In the distance was the island with its volcano, a great heap of stone looking more like the devilish Annabelle than anything. Despite the green hue of the lush vegetation, great puffs of gray smoke were billowing from its jaw and getting darker by the second. Okay, so literally it's just about to erupt. There she blows, shouted Baz. Black bits of rock came shooting out from the cone, and the sound hit us a second later, a deep, thunderous vibration that passed through the entire ship and rattled the windows. We were upwind of it, or we would have soon too been choking in ash smoke. It was venting high into the sky. So luckily, the wind was blowing the opposite way of where they were flying. But anyways, now they're in a ship. There's a volcano erupting. That's just like an extra part. Line 54. Soon the volcano was spitting out orange and red sparks, and then a gelatinous tongue of black and orange lava oozed over the crater's rim and started a leisurely slide down the slope, incinerating everything in its path. Good thing this was an uninhabited island. Okay, there's a lot of big words in there. What does leisurely mean? If it's taking a leisurely slide, what does that mean? Leisurely slide. Evan? Yeah, leisurely means like slow, when you're just walking, so it's just nice, slow slide. And then incinerating everything in its path. What does incinerating mean? Molly? So it is getting it out of the way, but by doing something specific. Isaac, do you know incinerating?
Destroying everything in its path.
Yeah, by burning it. An incinerator, lights things on fire and burns it. So if it's incinerating everything, it's like scorching it. It's burning it. It's not just moving things out of the way. It's going to be burnt. Ashes are only going to be left. And then an uninhabited island, that just means no one lives there. So a volcano's erupting and destroying plants and stuff, but it's not hurting any people or any buildings or anything. What? Amazing, isn't it? I glanced over and Kate was beside me. She was looking out the window, and I knew she wasn't talking about the volcano. There was no sign of Miss Simpkins, and there was no one else around us. Everyone was watching the eruption, talking and pointing excitedly and snapping pictures. Incredible, I said, and flattered, uncertain what to say next. I took the journal from my inside breast pocket and passed it to her. Thank you. You don't believe it, she said coldly. I'm not saying that. It's just, I'm not altogether certain your grandpa really knew what he was seeing. So, what conflict is introduced in this last part of the story? There's a new conflict, not just to decide whether, so are they real or are they not real, but there's a new conflict between two people. There's a conflict. What is this conflict, Evan?
Mostly saying someone's crazy, but I mean they might have an argument.
Okay, I need more than that. Molly? What? Okay, say that again, because all I heard was the beep. Okay, so you're on the right path. The new conflict is Matt believes Malloy had fallen ill and imagined things, but Kate believes her grandfather recorded in his journal was true. So it's not just are they real or are they not. Now Matt doesn't believe them, but Kate does. So there's that right there. Obviously, there are some evidences on the previous pages of the story that supports Kate's opinion that the creatures are real because, Malloy's drawings and descriptions are super detailed and scientific. But then there's also evidence to support Matt's opinion because, as he got further into the journal, there wasn't, the sketches became way crazier, way more outlandish, It seemed like he was dreaming. Things were, fictional. Just wasn't exactly the same. On these couple pages, there's lots and lots of some similes and some metaphors. For example, on what line was it? When they're talking about the mountain or the Mount Matras, it was as huge as Darky Rock Mountain that exploded the fire, then lava down its side. So that's a simile when you compare something using like your as. So the author just does a really good describing in this story, I believe. Evan. Yes. All right, turn the page. We are still have like 5 pages to go. This is the longest story. Okay, so Kate does not believe, or Kate does believe, but Matt doesn't. How can you say that? He spent days watching them and taking down notes like a scientist. He couldn't have made up all these things, not in such detail. It did seem an awful lot to imagine, even if he was delirious. I remembered his drawings. A weak, shaky hand couldn't have spun those lines. He always saw them from a distance, I pointed out. True. But think what he saw, the feeding, the birthing, those pictures towards the end. I had traversed the skies, Atlanticus to Pacificus, and never had seen such a creature. How to tell her that her grandfather had been ill, and his brain so feverish he projected these things on a thin air from his failing eyes to see. I thought of all her camera equipment, her bottles of chemicals, and could not find it in my heart to speak the plain truth. So he's just trying to, sometimes it's hard to tell people the truth, and he's having a hard time telling her the truth. But if he's traversed the skies, that just means he's traveled the skies from the Pacific side to the Atlantic side, is all he's saying. You think like the others, she said. There was a new hardness in her voice. I think your grandfather was unwell and saw things, maybe, I added. All the friendly light in her eyes had frosted away. It made me feel sick. No, he saw them. He'd been watching them for days. She clenched the journal in both hands, knuckles white. That means you're holding something so tight your knuckles can turn white. He was sick by then, I suppose, she said, but maybe he didn't mean us to think those last drawings were real. He was just imagining. Your grandpa's not the first to see such things. They're called skyclepes. Skyclepes? You see them from time to time, reflections on the water mostly, all sorts of weird atmospheric things. Airshipmen used to report them all the time. It's like how sailors used to think they were mermaids. They were just porpoises and narwhals and such. I could see she didn't like this much. I was insulting her. But what else could I say? I was just telling her facts. Has anyone ever tried to tell someone something and they just don't want to hear it, even though that's the truth? I'm sure your parents feel like that all the time with you guys, potentially. I definitely feel like that, hanging out with all you peeps all day. But sometimes, people just don't want to hear the truth. Even if you know the truth in your heart, sometimes it's still just hard to believe the truth. Landon, stop making noise, please. Maybe you should talk to the captain about it, I'd suggest. I'm sure he'd talk with you, miss. Captain Walken surely must have read the journal last year when he took the gondola aboard. I wondered that he'd never spoken of the strange things it contained, but of course he wouldn't have. He would have never divulged the contents of another captain's log to any but the relevant officers, and authorities. Next page. I don't need to talk to the captain about it. I'd expect I'd get as much of the same as what I've heard from you. So she doesn't even want to talk to other people because she thinks that no one's going to believe her still, which I'm going to tell you. I don't know if I'd believe her either. I'm kind of siding with Matt, personally. We are in actual reading class, Angelina. We already had reading RTI. That would be ReadWorks. So you need to have HMH open. It's not that I haven't looked, I blurted out as she turned to leave. I've looked for all sorts of things. You can take my word for it. Take my word on it. Every flicker in the sky, I shook my head. I've never seen anything, but I'd love to. What your grandfather described is amazing. It sent shivers across my belly, then up into my armpits. Me too, she said, nodding with a frown. That tingly feeling I get every time I read it, I've read it 100 times now. All the passengers in the lounge, including Miss Simpkins, luckily were still crowded around the windows, revelating by the eruption. The volcano was putting on quite a show. Half the island was aflame now, lava crackling and steaming as it poured into the water. So, what feeling did Matt and Kate share when they read Malloy's journal? What feeling did they share? What feeling did they share together? Rochelle? No, like the feeling, how they felt when they read the journal. Like an actual feeling. What? Tingling. They both felt like shivers and tingling, like they want to believe it's so bad, but they just don't know if they can. What does Matt actually believe Malloy saw? This weird word that Mrs. Kneifel couldn't really pronounce. Evan? No. How about you actually look at the story, bud? Skywalkers. What? Molly. The kelpies, yeah. He said they were just a reflection off water or something, maybe like a cloud or a bird, and it made a reflection. So he's like, it's just a reflection. It's nothing serious. What? Well, guess he's gonna miss what we're reading then, isn't he? He'll have a hard time on his test. Mr. Nolan. Okay. Have you ever shown the journal to anyone else? I asked her. Your parents, surely. I saw her nostrils narrow when she sucked in her breath. Your nostrils are this part of your nose, so she's like breathing it so deep she's sucking in her little nose. They're embarrassed by the whole business. Mother always thought he was odd. The traveling, the balloons, just silly. They always thought he was a bit of a nutter. Hallucinations, that's what they said. Let's forget the whole thing. That's why I sent the letter to the Zoologist Society myself. Zoological. Okay. However you say that. So anyways, her parents think that her grandpa's just hallucinating, meaning, seeing things. I blinked. I couldn't let my parents stop this from getting out to the world. This is a major discovery, a new animal. I wrote them a letter describing more or less what my grandfather saw and asked them if they cared to see the facsimile of his journal. Did they reply? Oh, yes. From her handbag, she produced a letter, and I folded square. The crease was so worn, you could tell she'd folded it and unfolded it many times. I could imagine her face when she read it, getting mad all over. It wasn't a long letter, and I read it quickly. Dear Miss DeVries, thank you for your letter. We appreciate you taking the time to tell us about your grandfather's observation on his balloon voyage, naming the site of some kind of winged mammal. We feel strongly that should such a creature exist, it would have surely been sighted and documented long ago. Every year, there are hundreds of unsustainable sightings of monstrous creatures in land, air, sea, and we feel it is our duty as men of science to gently remind you that your grandfather was not trained, and in his state of health, he may have suffered additional deficiencies of observation. So, why did Kate write the letter to the Zoological Society? Why did she write the letter in the first place? Kylan, why did she write the letter in the first place? Right. She's informing these people. There's a new animal, you need to know about it. How did the Zoological Society feel about her lovely discovery? Anyone? How did the Zoological Society react to the letter that she sent them? Were they like, oh my gosh, we have to investigate this right now? No, they were just like, yeah, this happens all the time. It's nothing new, is basically what they told her. So basically they're kind of being a little bit condescending in the letter, because they said winged mammal in quotes, meaning like, yeah, whatever he saw, they don't even care. They're kind of being super condescending, and they just don't even care what they actually saw. Okay. The next page, there's going to be a lot of dialogue, people talking back and forth. Feel free to just be watching that. Remember, you have to use dialogue in your Module 3 writing prompt. Additional deficiencies of observation. Kate scoffed, reading over my shoulder. They mean he was seeing things. So if you scoff, you're like, oh, can't believe it. The rest of the letter was the usual, yours sincerely, and thank you for your interest in the Zoological Society, etc., etc. It was signed Mr. Hoff-Sneffner, and I saw him in my mind's eye, short and balding, with a big, loud voice. As if they're exploring every inch of the planet, as if anyone has. And what about you? Kate fairly shouted. What about me? You've flown for years, yes? Well, 3. And how much of the actual sky have you traversed? Traversed is another word for travel. Not much when you put it that way. Exactly. Ships have their routes, and as you say, deviate from only when necessary. That must leave millions and millions of miles of unexplored sky and sea. I imagine you're right, I said, nodding. And how long have airships really been flying? 50 years or so now. Hardly any time at all. In other words, how can we possibly know they don't exist? So Kate has really been thinking this through. She's thinking of all the possible ways that these things really do exist. Especially out over the Pacificus, I said, surprising myself. The skyways and sea lands are much less traveled compared to the Atlanticus. Exactly, she said, beaming. Do your parents know you wrote the Zoological Society? Heavens no, they would have locked me in a room without a pen or paper. They'd have been mortified telling anyone outside the family, spreading his mad rantings. Question is all this imagination or real? The coordinates he wrote down from the island, do we pass over them? I'd have to check, but I think not. Will you check though? Yes, I said. And if we don't pass over, will you tell me when we'll be nearest the spot? I'll do that. Will you really? She seemed amazed. Yes. All right, we are going to stop there. We are not going to read the last page. We're going to read the last page together tomorrow, and then we're going to have some collaborative discussion questions in the beginning, and we're going to review our roots or our suffixes and prefixes, and then you're going to take the quiz for homework, and then Friday you'll take the actual test. Yes, Angelina. My kids, if you're in class, hold on one second. My kids, if you're in class, get your PE shoes on and get in line. Angelina, what's up?
I was trying to read the story so I could only listen and follow along because my username and password isn't working for HMH. It's
Okay,
not
well,
letting me log in.
It has definitely not changed, so you probably just need to log off your computer and start again because no passwords have changed. But I have to take the kids to PE, so I'm going to log off now. There will be another live at 11:40ish for grammar. Just a short one, so feel free to join. We're just going to review a little bit together. It'll only be about 15, 20 minutes, so come on for grammar in a little bit. Goodbye, guys.
Avery,
What?
can you cut your camera on? Oh my goodness, I miss school so much, and I have not seen you or anybody in person like forever.